Throughout history, the ideas of good and evil have been relatively absolute, at odds since their inception. The nature of these concepts is abstract, and there are many different interpretations that attempt to define them and the nature of humans in relation to them. The Puritans are among the most set in their definitions and criteria for what constitutes whether something is good or evil. These ideas are prominent in the literature of the time, and some of their major beliefs are still prevalent today in modern America, such as their case of salvation and redemption, albeit these have shifted to be slightly less like that. But obviously some things have changed since the 1700s, right? I mean, we aren't wearing bonnets and petticoats, and most of us aren't spending the majority of our time on farms or in prayer. With the rise of commercialism, the attitudes towards this dichotomy in relation to ourselves and our society have shifted drastically. Let me show you what I mean. First off, if we're to understand what's changed, we need to understand more of how things used to be. We know now that the Puritans were very, very, very religious and had a very, very, very strict moral code revolving heavily around their religion. They had an incredibly specific idea of what would get you into heaven and what would get you sent to hell. They also had an interesting attitude towards themselves as well as God. One extreme example of these guidelines is Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, a sermon written and given by Jonathan Edwards in the mid-1700s. The sermon seems hell-bent on the idea that condemnation is the default, and that one must stay on their best behavior for their entire lives, clinging to Sky Santa and trusting that he forgive them just in time to put them on the nice list. Mr. Edwards also seems to believe that those who follow God the closest will end up in heaven. Everyone is predestined to hell unless you get on God's good side. Oh, speaking of predestination, that was another thing. The Puritans were firm believers that God had laid out a path for your life to follow and there was no way to stray from this preset destiny. An extreme case of everything happens for a reason, basically. This seems pretty different from the ideas we have surrounding destiny today, right? There seems to be a running theme throughout a lot of recent literature that one can choose their own destiny, that you aren't your upbringing or your circumstances, and you can make something good of a bad person if you just convince them to get back on the right track. A lot of children's media in particular focuses on the reformation of villains and the glorification of heroic figures. Many characters don't even have prominent negative traits, and if they do, they don't interfere with their inherent goodness. Nowadays, though, the idea that evil is inherent and cannot be escaped but repressed has morphed into a kind of false dichotomy and reversed itself. Now we feel that good is as innate as evil, but good can triumph if given enough compassion. This is pretty similar, however, to the Puritan idea that faith in God can cleanse one's spirit and allow you into heaven, isn't it? Even Mr. Edwards back there said something like, "However, you may have reformed your life in many things, and may have had religious affections, and may keep up a form of religion in your families and closets, and in the house of God, it is nothing but his mere pleasure that keeps you from being this moment swallowed up in everlasting destruction." Which basically says that keeping your faith close is the only way to save your soul. This isn't an exact parallel to the adherence to good that keeps our heroes and their friends on the light side, but rather a faith in themselves that keeps our hero from succumbing to evil. The Puritans were preoccupied with the notion that God was the only truly good thing, and pushed people to trust him in his image to remain good, but this belief has become more self-empowering by pushing narratives that encourage the viewer to not suppress the evil, but strive to trust the good in themselves, to hold themselves to remaining good, and I think that's pretty cool. Definitely a better message for the kiddos. Imagine if you'd grown up being told that you were an evil, bad person, and you would never not be evil and wicked, and the only way you wouldn't be subject to eternal suffering after your early death to smallpox or something would be able to spend half your day talking to God and begging him for your forgiveness from the crimes you have only the capability of committing. That doesn't sound fun, right? This dramatic shift in our perception of good and evil in ourselves and the media we consume has led to a more positive and self-centric general belief that sends a much better message than, if you think about a sex, you are going to hell. But that's just me. Thanks for watching. Ha 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 ha, bye.